Charlie Steed was performing some work for Utility Power Company in southern Utah. Specifically, he was helping do some transmission line work. A group of engineers were discussing that they would need to hire a pilot to fly a helicopter to pull an electrical line over the remote roadless area. But one of them joked unless we could get Charlie and his boys to come fly their drones. The Steed boys, Roy and Kevin, have been involved in the RC hobby ever since they were little, and they began flying their drones early on.
When I started my aerial business, it was back in 2015. I flew drones before that. We were into the RC industry. But you know, I was looking into this industry and figuring out, you know, what can I do? I really have a passion for this industry. It's quite and I wanted to figure out, you know, how can I put this drone to work to where it's turning back the investment that I'm investing here. And so I started out thinking, you know, I'll try photography. It turned into a very competitive market. And as I went on, we were in the electrical industry, and my dad was in the lineman industry working for a power company. So I did an interview with them probably a few months after I started my business. We talked about it. We were mostly talking about the inspection work. And probably a year and a half later, it turned out that they had some pulls that need done with the drone.
And so Charlie and his sons attempted to what most thought was the impossible, pulling a cable line with a drone. But let's take a step back to paint a really great picture of how the Steed family had to overcome some hurdles to accomplish this task. Flying a drone in remote rural Utah takes time, careful planning, and surely some great setup.
It's over in southern Utah where you have a lot of mountains and ravines, and we had these big canyons that we were flying over that you couldn't drive through, and it was really hard to even hike through it. And so we would get a crew on one side of the ravine, and they would drive around to the easiest place to hike in, and then I would hike in from one side, and then I would have to take my drone all the way back over the canyons to land it to get new batteries.
So we had to set up where we had a place to base the drone with the battery charger system, with the generator, and then we had the crew up on the top where the line was being pulled from. Then we'd had to have another one of us over on the other side where the line was being pulled to so that we could receive it. And so basically you got three different areas where we're working. We got somebody keeping batteries charged, guiding, and we'd have to see, Roy would be flying it from a remote area. He'd be like probably a couple thousand feet away from the battery station, so he'd have to land off the visual from the camera and guidance through radio communication with the person there at the battery charging site. And then if he could either fly it toward him or he could fly it away from him as far as the receiving or flying out the rope. And sometimes I would be on the receiving end and he'd fly it to me and I'd guide him in to get the line, or sometimes I may be on the end that we was pulling it from and I'd guide him in to hook it up, and then he'd fly it toward himself. Sometimes we'd do one way or the other depending on just how it worked out as far as getting set up.
Naturally, the first attempt was a bit tricky. Think reception, height, scale, distance, and even battery. But the Steed team was up to the challenge.
The pulls were up to 2,000 feet in length, and so we had to be able to pull out a line across 2,000 feet, and that was, you know, the target of the distance that we needed. And so, you know, these drones we had were too small, so after a couple of efforts and seeing that we were not going to do very well that way, then we invested in a bigger drone.
After realizing they needed to make some changes, they went back to the drawing board. This time, they decided to look at how a different drone might solve the problem.
We got another Inspire in. It was the version of Inspire that was supposed to carry the X5 camera, so from our understanding is the motors were bigger, so we could lift a little more payload. So you thought, we'll bring this in. We built us a drop system on it to release payload, because our concern was if we get this out here, our battery starts going dead, this string gets caught, we got to be able to drop this load to get our drone back safely. So we put together a drop system and mounted it on there, and the second flight was definitely an upgrade from our first flight.
Now I'm laughing here because you guys are all breathing. I can just see the sigh right now you guys are feeling. We saw success here, that's what it was, right? Look at you. That's right.
Yep.
Roy, you're sitting there going, I was achieving a success here and flying that thing. Look at it. I see it.
And so when we flew that second one out from primarily that first flight, the second one gave us it felt like we were on the road. The first one really got us back to the planning table again, wondering how it was going to go. The second one, it put there was a lot more uplift. It gave us more motivation. We says, this is going somewhere now. We got a bigger drone.
Looking ahead to the future is what brought the Steed family to Interdrone, and that is where I met up with Charlie, Kevin, and Roy. It's at Interdrone that the Steed men were on the search for the next drone of the future. They are seeking something bigger and better, and the drones that'll assist them on their future projects.
We're mid-span here. We've got some improvements to make, and the whole project in general is a work in progress for sure. We've got a lot of things we need to improve on it, but yet it's encouraging to know that we are able to accomplish the task, in whatever measures we're able to so far. But we're looking for, better ways, better improvements. How to advance and take this capability to higher levels of efficiency and production and just make it work.
They see even greater opportunities for drones in the future, specifically using drones for thermal inspections for transmission lines. But even more than that, they are turning their childhood hobby into a full-time career.
I guess what it boils down to, though, is that if we can go and make our passion our job, then that's what we're after. If I can go, I flew model airplanes and helicopters for a long time just for the fun of it, and it just costed me money. And now if I can do it for my job and be able to make money at it and do it for all the time, basically, then that's what I'm after.
As I see it, they just might be onto something. KRS Aerial. That's someone you should know.